Today on episode 133 of the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, we speak to engagement expert Lisa Ryan. And today on the show, she's going to tell you how you can get your employees engaged, how you can get them focused, and how you can get them involved in your organization to lead to explosive output. That's right, folks. This is all about you and your employees today. So if you're ready for this, let's do it.
Welcome to this episode of Moving Forward Leadership. Stick around and learn how to achieve, excel, and become a leader that people willingly follow. Lead, don't boss. And now, here's the host of our show, Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy.
Welcome all to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and it's so great to have you here at the podcast where we talk about the three domains of leadership, and that is leading yourself so that you can become the best leader that you want to be, leading your team so that you can achieve that high-performing team, and then finally, leading your organization so that you can achieve the highest output possible. And here at Moving Forward Leadership, we couple world-class guests like my guest Lisa Ryan today with 20 years of military experience to bring you this show. So it's so great to have you and to have you listening. And today we're talking about employee engagement, and it's so crucial. It is so crucial. I'm not going to try to grab the stats out there. Feel free to look them up yourself. But the moral of the story is this. Most, and I don't mean like, 51%. I mean, significant amount of your employees are not engaged. They are just showing up, they are just doing the job, and they are going home, and they do not care, do not have ownership, they don't have any buy-in, they have nothing, zero care about how your organization does, whether it sinks or swims or flies. As far as they're concerned, they're there to do a job, and that is it. And that is not about how we go about building high-performing teams. That is not how we reach our organizational's maximum output, right? We need engaged employees. Why? Because they're the ones that bring us the solutions. They're the ones that go out and get those sales. They're the ones that go out and talk to our clients. They're the ones that are the face of the organization, and they are the ones that we need to have on board. So that is why today's topic is so important. And I brought in Lisa. She's got more than 20 years of experience in marketing, training, sales. So she's worked around the different departments of these, of large corporations. So she has an idea of what it means to be engaged in these areas. She is also the president and founder of Grategy. It's a Cleveland-based firm specializing in employee engagement, retention, and recognition using gratitude strategies, or what she likes to call Grategies. Her work and experience goes into employee engagement and cultural transformation, and gives her kind of a unique perspective on how we can retain our top talent. And it's so crucial to retain our top talent because it takes so much work, time, effort, money, energy, et cetera, to get our top talent. And when we lose them, it leaves a gaping hole. So that is today's episode, folks. And that is it for me. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Lisa Ryan, talking about how you can engage your employees with thanks. Lisa, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It is so great to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
So one of the things I like to do with my guests is, get them to give a little background about themselves to the listener out there, who they are, where they come from, how did you get to where you are today? So why don't we start off with that before we really dive into, the nuts and bolts of the conversation?
Okay. Well, I am born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and I start out with that because I absolutely love my city. I've actually never lived outside of my county, totally by choice. Rest of my family has kind of flown the coop, but my husband and I love it here. As a matter of fact, Scott, who is my husband, has lived in both Cuyahoga and Summit County, both Northeast Ohio. So, he's obviously a man of the world. But my career, I was started it as an executive recruiter. I sold salespeople, pharmacists, and secretaries. And one of the few people on the planet who can actually say they sold their mother. Mom actually hated that job, but I said, Mother, you have got to stay there at least 90 days because I have a guarantee and I can't afford to give back the commission I made on you. So thankfully, Mom was there for 2.5 years. She's still, we're still good friends. Then I went into industrial sales, where for 13 years I sold things like electrical cord and cable into the maintenance environment. And then I sold welding rod. And yes, I do weld. And then from there, I went into healthcare. All through my career, speaking was part of it. I was a corporate computer trainer when I was in the welding industry. I did health-related continuing education programs at that job. But then it was always something that I wanted to be a speaker. And then when my medical sales position was eliminated, October 12th, 2010, via group conference call with 12 of us getting canned at the same time, I basically said, no company will ever do that to me again. And I started my speaking business on that day, probably starting a brand new business in 2010 in the midst of a recession. Not the most brilliant idea, but 10 years later, until COVID, it seems that now that all sentences have to end with and then COVID. But it's been a ball, and I am doing exactly what I love. I focus on teaching organizations how they can keep their top talent from becoming someone else's. And a lot of that is really a focus on gratitude and appreciation, helping employees feel that they are valued, respected, within the organization, and creating the type of culture that makes them want to stay. So there you go, the Cliff Notes.
Dum, dum, dum. That is so cool. You weld.
Yes, I do. I got the scars to prove it.
Oh, I believe it. I guess some work I need done. You want to pop up to Kingston? It's not that far from. But all things being COVID, you'd have to do nothing for 2 weeks.
I don't think Canada's letting Americans in yet. So that probably will be a while.
Yeah. Probably you can get in for good reason with connections to someone in Canada, but coming up to do a welding job for a guy you met over a Zoom call for a podcast interview probably doesn't meet criteria. Yeah. Just saying.
Yeah, that would put me on the red list.
Yeah. So let's talk about what the cliffhanger you just left us there in retaining our top talent, because it was going on before COVID hit. It may have slowed down, but there is basically a mass exit. I wouldn't say mass exodus of organizations, but a lot of organizations are having a hard time holding on to their people. They're leaving. People are leaving. And often I talk here at Moving Forward Leadership, the tagline is lead, don't boss. And the reason why they're leaving is why? Well, the latter part of that tagline, the boss, right? So can you dive into a little bit of the statistics of how many people, what is the average turnover rate in organizations, and what the effects are having on organizations because of all this turnover, because organizations don't have that culture to keep their people?
Sure. Well, the interesting thing is the Gallup organization started assessing employee engagement back in the early 2000s. And back then, they found about 30% of employees were actively engaged, meaning that they are your rock stars. You know who they are. They have a best friend at work. They get the job done. They're actually bringing more profit to your organization than the money you are paying them. They are profitable to you. About 50% of employees are disengaged. Basically, they're doing just enough work so that they don't get fired. And then you have 20% of your employees are the toxic, horrible people that suck the life out of the room. Now, these are numbers in the US. Worldwide engagement, that active engagement level is only about 13%. So the funny thing is, though, that these numbers don't change very much. Sometimes the engagement level will go as high as 33%. Sometimes it'll go down as low as 28%. But what that's saying is there's a lot of organizations that are doing things really well, and there's a lot of organizations that aren't. I know when I do one of my programs and somebody comes up to me afterwards and says, "Oh, my company really needs you. You need to come in and talk to us." I know that there is no way that that company is going to bring me in, because it's the companies that are already doing things well and want to get better that make the investments in their employees that help them stay. So, before COVID, we were at full employment, highest employment ever, and retention was a problem. Why? Because employees could go anywhere they wanted, because jobs, people need skills. There's not enough labor to go around. And so if you had a really good employee, even in full employment, you have to keep those people. Well, now we're at record levels of unemployment. And it's more important than ever to keep your people, because once the economy turns around, once we get through all this, you want those people who know your business, who know their job, who care about your company, and you want them to stay. So when it comes to just creating that culture, it's focusing on the good that people do. It's letting those valuable employees know that you value them and treat them accordingly. So it really doesn't matter the economy. Engagement is all that, but retention, that's the big thing, because you work so hard to get employees, but if you're not taking care of them, you know what? You're not going to keep them.
No, it's so right. It's so difficult to, one, get employees, and to get the right ones, and that when they show up and you finally have them, like, you should be doing whatever you can within reason, obviously, to keep them. Now, it's funny thing is that I find times like this, times of crisis, when the economic downturn 2008 hits, stuff like this is the time where engagement and how deep your employees bond is with your company and your organization. Because if something better pops up, they're not going to second question. There's going to be no two questions about it. It's not going to be like, "Oh, I don't really know because I'm not, I know the company, but I don't really know it that well. It's pretty good here. Yeah, I'm going to be making a little bit less where I'm at right now, but it's nice, it's comfortable, blah, blah, blah." When you have times of crisis, people are like, "Oh, job security, better money, gone. I'm not even going to think about it if I'm in an organization that doesn't have that employee engagement going on." So what are some of the contributing factors that drive employee engagement out there for the leaders, so that they make sure that they can do their own analysis and be like, am I doing the right things to make sure that my people are engaged in the workforce?
One of the things that I'm most known for, and I cover in a lot of my programs, is my thanks program. So I'm an acronym girl, so this is really the quick version of it, and that the T is to build trust. When you commit to something, there's too many times that managers or leaders will go to a seminar and they'll come home just bright full of ideas, and they want all of these things put into place immediately. And the employees are like, "You know what? You did that last time. Nothing happened. I'm just going to ignore you." So building trust means that you're transparent, means that you're approachable. And number one, it means that you say that that you do what you say you're going to do. So trust, without trust, nothing else matters. The H is to help your employees to be better tomorrow than they are today. So that is what we were talked about a little bit earlier with that investing in your training, investing in your employees, because I can probably tell you with 99% accuracy that nobody ever quit a job because of too much training. Oh my God, this company just values me so much. They're just throwing money at me for training. I'm going to quit. That does not happen. The A is to acknowledge, applaud, appreciate the people who have working for you, catching them in the act of doing things well instead of always looking for the bad, looking for the problems and focusing on that. The N, I think, is more important today than ever because it's navigating work-life integration. For many organizations, they had employees working from home for the first time and dealing with kids and parents, aging parents, and having to homeschool and daycare and all of these things, and worried about their health and still get the job done. So with technology, with remote employees, but more than ever with time, having that flexibility, that work-life balance, there's no such thing as balance. Work-life integration is important. The K, get to know your employees. Do they like public recognition, private recognition? What kind of candy bar do they like? What are their hobbies? What are their kids' names? There will be employees that don't want to share any of that with you, but most of them want some kind of relationship that they know that you care about them personally. And the S, to serve a greater mission. We want to be bigger than something we want to play part in something that's bigger than us. So what is your organization doing to give back? How are you contributing to something that's bigger than your employees? So in short, trust, help, acknowledge, navigate, know, and serve. And when you do that, you're showing thanks and you're keeping your people.
Well, first off, let me say, as an Army officer, I live by acronyms on a second basis at work. So the thanks model works for me. So thanks for that. Let's dive into these, shall we? Can we tear them apart a little bit deeper and go a little bit deeper into them? Because there's so many great nuggets in there. And I really liked how you led with trust, because it despises me. So when I do my coaching calls, and it's one of the first questions I ask my clients, Mike. So how do you deal with trust? Because it's actually a little bit of a really deep thought, right? Like how do you trust? And and a lot of them are like, oh, it takes a lot for my people to earn my trust. I'm like, kind of wrong attitude. They're like, what? Like, why? They got to prove themselves. Blah, blah, blah. Like, well, they've proved themselves because you gave them a letter of employment or a letter of offer or whatever you call it in your organization. You hired them. So you immediately brought them into your second family, your inner circle. They're part of your organization. So how do you not trust them at the gate? And the fact is, 99.9 to infinity percentage of employees out there want to do a good job. They want to be helpful. They apply to the job for your company or your organization for a reason. Yeah, sure, that 0.1% is just looking for a job. But when someone shows up to an organization, they're not disengaged right away. They're actually the inverse. They're probably the most engaged they'll ever be in the organization. So how do you not give them 100% of your trust out of the gate? You lead them through, but you got to trust them that they're going to turn around and do a good job. So that's how I look at it and how I coach people in dealing with this. But from your standpoint, what are some of the aspects of that are there for employers regarding trust? Why is that sometimes such a difficult thing to do? And why do you have to have, why does your acronym have to be thanks in the first place with a T? Why can't it be Hanks?
Right. Yeah, because again, without trust, nothing else matters. And that is being transparent. Your employees, they don't always need to hear the good news and only good news. If you are being straight with them, you can tell them the good news, you can tell them the bad news, you can tell them everything in between. They may not like it, but if they know that you're coming from a place of transparency and they trust you, you're more likely to be able to get the buy-in you need. I think of my two bosses, and everybody has these two bosses. There's the one who is my favorite boss of all time. We're still good friends, and I have not worked for Dale since 2003. And I still, if I'm going through Kentucky, we get together. If he's in Cleveland, we get together. My other boss, he who shall not be named, he was in the emperor's not wearing clothes. You couldn't trust him. We had an argument, and a year later it showed up on my personal performance review. So it's just these little things. It's like, I thought we talked about that. Meanwhile, with Dale, he was there. He would celebrate with me when things were going great. He would talk me off the ledge when things weren't going well. Whatever colorful language I chose to share with him, if I was having a bad day, it didn't matter, because he was always there for me. He always had my back, and no matter what, he was there for me. And even when I quit that job, it's like we had a great conversation about it. I was moving from a straight commission independent sales rep to having, probably one of those sales jobs that everybody looks forward to, with the salary and the bonuses and the 401k and the healthcare and blah, 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 you name it. So instead of being mad or feeling that I was disloyal, Dale was actually proud of me for the move in my career that I made. So if you just look at that connection and let your people know that you care about them, and you're not afraid to let them know, hey, things are going really well, things are not going so well. Too many times I think that management teams err on the side of only sharing when things are bad. Oh, the numbers are down. Oh, our sales are down. Oh, this. Because they seem to be afraid that if they're saying, oh my God, we had a record year, this is awesome, that their employees are all going to want a lot more money. It's like, if you're open to sharing, that open book, things are good, things are bad, things are everything in between, your employees come to trust you, and they know that you're not just blowing smoke because you don't want to pay them a bonus.
Oh, that's so many good things. Actually, it sparks a story in my mind if I hear you for a second, because it kind of hits almost all your points. So I was once a squadron commander. So I commanded a squadron of 200 soldiers, Canadian soldiers, and it's divided up in three different main sections: maintenance troop, a supply troop, and a transport troop. And for the 2 years I commanded that, every year at Christmas I would ask for the stats of our key stats of the different troops. How many vehicles did we repair, and how much purchasing did we do? How many kilometers did we drive, and all this stuff. And people just thought I was being a stats junkie. But they didn't realize the first year. They kind of caught on in the second year, unfortunately. But the first year, I got everybody together right before Christmas break, and I had all the stats, and I broke it all down, and I said, okay, maintenance, stand up. And I said, this is what you did this past year, right? And acknowledge the team there, and showing them, how many vehicles they fixed, and how many weapons, and how many hours, how many days was that. The transport guys, how many kilometers did they run? Like, okay, well, let's put that in terms of trips around the world, because that's literally based off the number of kilometers that they did. And then the final thing I did was, we did a lot of procurement within the local city here, Kingston. And I said, these are tax dollars that we are now pumping back into our local city, folks. And I equated that to the number of households based off of average income. So again, serving that greater mission. So we already serve the greater mission, but it was even one beyond that. But it's just showing them, like, being transparent with them, showing them that, hey, this is what you achieve. I trust you guys to do all this. I'm acknowledging you, and saying what a great job you've done, and being up there and saying, this is not about me. This is not about me gloating. It's actually all about you, So I love what you've been saying so far, and the acronym. And I also love the second point, the H in helping employees, because during that time, I often said, my job is to enable you to do yours. So let's unpack that one a bit more. So how can leaders out there be, help? How can they help their employees to do a better job?
Well, a lot of times when there's budget cuts, training seems to be the very first thing that gets cut, and that's the very worst thing that you can cut, or people be like, why should I spend all that money in training? I'm just going to, spend all this money, and then those employees are just going to leave anyway. And it's like, you ask yourself the question, yeah, but what if you don't train them and they stay? We want to invest in our employees because they feel valued. They know that you as a company, you're making, an investment in them, which is great. Richard Branson of Virgin Airlines has a quote that I love, and he says, train people as if they could leave, but treat them so that they don't want to. So when you look at, hey, I'm getting the best I can out of my employees, I'm sending them, and there's so many different ways that you can train. You can do things that cost no money at all. If you find out what your employees are good at and have them train each other. I had one of my clients, and were working with this dream manager, which was super cool to begin with. But one of the employees had taken, I think it's Dave Ramsey's Financial University. And so what they did is they brought they gave this employee the opportunity to teach the other employees about financial wellness. It cost the company no money. It gave the employee the opportunity to shine and to help and to feel that he was really contributing. And it also earned him the respect of his employees. So we can look at things to do internally. We can bring in a trainer, shameless plug, but you think about it, you have somebody and, you're in HR or you're a trainer and your people are seeing your face every single day. And it's like, oh no, it's sexual harassment training. Again, we go through this every year. She's going to say the same thing, whatever it is. I could come in to your organization and say the exact same thing. You could give me a script for something that you said at last week's meeting. I can say the same thing. Employees will hear it differently because that outside person is not that same face that they're seeing all the time. Sending employees to outside training, these public seminar companies, particularly if you have new supervisors, because that way they're in a room full of people who are in the same boat as they are. They're not feeling alone. They can learn. They can make connections in a safe place away from the office or away from the plant. And also, I speak at I used to speak at a lot of conferences. And you think about the benefits of sending your employees to conferences. Not only is it a super cool recruiting tool, as your guys get back and they're like, oh yeah, I was in Vegas at a big conference last week, boss paid for it, that their buddy at the bar is going to be like, wow, how do I work for that company? But they go to the conference, they're going to programs, they're seeing what the competitors are doing, they're seeing what's going on in the market if they go to the trade show booths. So there's everything from no money, using the employees that you have in-house as your in-house trainers, all the way to conferences and everything in between. This is something that you can literally let your imagination run wild and just choose different things and ask your employees, what do you want to learn about? Because I also have people that say, we tried that lunch and learn thing, but, nobody ever showed up. It's like, well, were you actually doing something they wanted to learn about? Did you ask them? Did it have to be absolutely related to business? Maybe your employees want to know, presentation skills training. Maybe they want yoga or mindfulness or something that is not in direct correlation of your business. But if that's what gets them to show up and bond with each other and learn together, do it.
Oh, wow. Love it. I feel like you're up on your pedestal there and you're just
was
going.
gonna say,
But
mic drop with the soapbox, man.
yeah. Take that Yeti, throw it on the floor. But you started off so interesting. I had to bite my lip and leave myself on mute and not cut in because I could just see you rolling. And the part you started off with was when times get tough, training gets cut. And that's interesting because when times get tough, that's when you want to be the most effective. That's when you want to be the most efficient. And how do you get more effective? How do you get more efficient? You do it by making better people. And that is through training, right? And it's like, that is how you help your people. And that's what I used to talk about day in, day out when I was that squadron command. I'm like, how can we get better? How can we do things better? How can I empower your people to be better? What training are they lacking that they feel like they could use? I don't care if people think they need it, but what do they feel like they could use? Where's the opportunity? Because all suddenly, when it's time that we actually do need it, well, it's too late. So right. I love it. And I love, yes, it doesn't have to be, someone like you, someone like me coming in. Heck, hire us if you want. Another shameless plug. But the point is, you do have great internal resources. You just don't know. And that's going to probably go into a couple points later when you talk about knowing your employees. And that's another segue that you can, get to know your employees and like, oh, wow, you do this, you do that. Well, why don't we? Would you be interested in setting up a little seminar for an hour or a couple for a week, lunchtime? And it makes your people feel valued. It brings something different and it empowers them to, get that growth mindset that we want and need in our organizations today, because the world just is changing way too fast. We can't be stagnant anymore. COVID is like, where'd that come from? And if you're just, continuously rely on what we refer to as Sally, same as last year, it's going to bite you eventually. Yep. So with that, helping employees, next is acknowledging them. So some people really do this bad. Right. They do it absolutely horrible. And unfortunately, I'm critical of my own work in that we don't really do it good either. Some people think we do it great. I'm sitting on the inside. I'm like, I don't think we do it that well. I think some parts we got to figure it out. And other parts we're like, we can really do better. So how do we go about properly acknowledging our people to make sure that, we thank you. We acknowledge what you're doing. And it's such an important part to the organization.
Yeah. Marshall Lasada did a study where he looked at teams and their communication patterns. And what he found on a high-performing team, there was a 6-to-1 positivity ratio, which simply means that for every one negative thing on that team that a person would hear, they would hear at least 6 positives. And the positives weren't like, oh, everything you do is so great. It was like, that's a really good start of an idea. Let's see how we can build on that. So that 6-to-1 was respectful communication. On an average performing team, it dropped in half to 3-to-1, 3 positives for every 1 negative. And at 3-to-1, you're pretty much at neutral. Okay, your employees are doing exactly the amount of work that they're paid for, probably just a little bit less. And then on a low performing team, it's 0.3-to-1. So they are literally hearing 3 times more negatives than they are positives. So if you just switch that, because if you're a leader that says, well, I don't need to thank my people. I mean, that's what they get a paycheck for. And, and you're constantly harping on them and catching them in the act of doing things bad, you know what? You're going to get more of that. What gets recognized gets repeated. So if you could even get from focusing on the negative, maybe you're at that 3 negatives for every 1 positive. If you can just flip that and go 3 positives to 1 negative and at least get yourself to neutral where you're not doing damage to your employees, it'll make the workplace so much better. At one of my programs, I had a guy come up to me afterwards and he said, Lisa, when I do something wrong, I get recognized 100% of the time. And when I do something right, it's rarely noticed. And we need to flip those numbers. We need to start looking for being specific. And most importantly, just saying thank you. Saying thank you and meaning it sincerely. So instead of just say thanks, and you're not being specific as far as, well, what are you thanking me for? Thank you so much for putting in that extra 45 minutes so we can get that order out. Kind of what you were just saying, what you did with your squadrons is that people know that you're paying attention, and you're paying attention to the good work that they do, even though, well, that's what I do every day. That's what I get paid for. I don't even think about it. And they're thinking, they work on, I'm just making up numbers here, but, they work on 10 vehicles a day. Okay. So at the end of the year, there's 3,000 vehicles that they would have worked on. And in their mind, if they even think about it, but you come in and you tell them, last year you did 7,263 vehicles. And they're like, holy guacamole, because they don't, you're specific in just catching them and noticing. And we are so, as human beings, we want to be recognized. We're starved for that attention. And just these little things that don't take a whole lot of time, cost no money to do, can make a huge difference in creating that engagement and increasing your retention.
The top is the loneliest place. Colin Powell said that once. But it doesn't have to be. Instead, you can find people to talk to, people to run ideas by, people to help you figure out solutions to the problems that you're facing right now as a leader. And see, I felt alone once, and I decided to start the podcast. And with the podcast, I decided that I needed to help people like you more. So that's why I started the Moving Forward Leadership Facebook group. Leadership skills for managers to be leaders, not bosses. You can find it at movingforwardleadership.com/group. And come join us. It's completely free for you to join us and talk leadership with us day in, day out. So check us out again at movingforwardleadership.com/group. Now back to the show. Yeah, those stats are horrible, right? Like the ratios.
Yeah.
So if someone's thinking, oh, that's a load of crap, well, let's, in my mind, I was just thinking this. Let's put it in this context. If you showed up to home and your husband, Scott, nagged at you 3 times as much as what he gave you praise for around the house, how long would you last?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be in a relationship. It was like same thing with my wife Julie. If I showed up and for every one thing that she said, hey, thanks for that, it was 3 nags, well, we would have been long done, because that's not the type of relationship you want to be in working and being in an organization, being part of a company. Well, congratulations, you're in a relationship, whether you like it or not. It may not be a romantic one, but it's a relationship nonetheless. And if it's nothing but constant negativity, well, people are going to go find positivity elsewhere, because you know what? People's lives then starting to impact. Like, this is miserable. I spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day at this place, like more than my home and my family's, and I show up to this garbage day in, day out. I'm going to find something better. And Joe, my best friend, saying he loves over there and they got an empty position. Oh, I'm going to make 15 grand less a year. I don't care, because 15 grand is worth my happiness.
Yep. Well, and it's funny you talk about your wife and relationships, because that study that Marshall Lasada did was also based on a study that Dr. John Gottman did. And he's a marriage researcher. And what he would do is he would watch couples communicate. And he actually found in happy marriages, there is a 5-to-1 positivity ratio. Gottman got so good with what he did that he could literally watch a couple communicate for 4 minutes and predict with 96% accuracy if that marriage was going to survive. So that's the thing that I love about this conversation we're having is this just isn't just for the office. This isn't just for the plant. This isn't just for the workforce of any kind. This is personal. If you can use these tips to find the good that your spouse is doing, to find the good that your kids are doing, and you're able to have a better relationship at home, better relationship, less stress, more happiness, then you're bringing that better person into the workplace, and it's easier to start to also catch your employees doing things well because you see the benefits of it at home.
No, that makes absolute sense. And I've often said that it doesn't matter where you're at. We need leadership everywhere. You need to be a leader at home. You need to be a leader at the workforce. You need to be a leader just out and about in your community. And we need that, right? So it makes so much sense. Let's hit the hot topic of the day, shall we?
Sure.
COVID, but more importantly, the navigating the work-life integration. I like how you put that, the integration, because I fully agree with you. There is no balance. There is no such thing as a balance. From when I leave my house, I left my house at 8 a.m. this morning. I showed back up at 4:30. Guess what? I was fully in work mode. Right? There's no balance. I come home and I go fully dad husband mode. And then now because we have young boys, they're in bed, and now I'm gone, to work mode again for my side hustle. So there's no balancing act there. But I like how you put it. There's integration, because there is an integration. There's integration between my wife and I and how we schedule and stuff like this, and who picks up kids, who drops off kids, and when I can podcast, when I can't podcast, and all this jazz. But what we need to talk about for leaders out there is like, how can they best go about, helping their people achieve that, right? Because it works well for me right now. I do have a good work-life integration. I have the ability to work from home when required, such as a time when one of my kids gets sick and my wife, who's an essential worker, needs to work. And I do have the ability to do things I want at home. But what are the aspects for the leader out there to consider and how they can bring that to their organization, especially now with everything that's going on?
Well, one of the most valuable gifts that employers, that managers have is time and the flexibility of time and looking at every area of your business differently. Because say that you have employees and, your hours are, let's say, 7 to 3. Okay. Would it make a huge deal if you said, you know what, you can come in at 7 to 3, or you can work from 6:30 to 2:30? Sometimes just that little bit of flexibility, that gives employees a choice in the matter. I was speaking a couple of years ago at a roofing expo. So if you think about roofing, the roofing industry, if the sun is out and it's not raining, those guys are putting on roofs. Well, this one owner had such a hard time finding people that what he did is they put on roofs from Monday through Friday. Their employees had every weekend off. Now, did they lose some business because of that? Yeah, they had to turn down some jobs. But were they actually more profitable? Yeah. Because they had workers that were consistent, that got the job done quickly, that had been with them for a long time. And all he did was he gave them what they were looking for of time, the time to spend with their families. We have different priorities right now. We have so much going on our plate. And I think that is one of the true blessings that came out of COVID is we've talked for so long, oh, we don't have time to spend with our kids. We don't have time to spend with our families. We don't have time with this. And now we've almost been forced into spending time with people. My husband has been on furlough since Good Friday, man. Scott and I have been married for 24 years. And, and I thank God for him every day, number one. But this has given us the opportunity to build the relationships too. But on the same token, if I was an employee, I have a dad who's been in long-term care facility and has been on lockdown since March 15th. I worry about him. It's just employers have to think about all of these things. And if you have remote workers and the only time that you're staying in touch with them is, well, did you get the work done? What do you need to get the job done? Instead of, how are you doing? How's your family? How's your health? How's your stress level? Putting set hours, because otherwise remote workers, I'm used to working at home. I've been working at home since 1997. Okay. But people who are not used to working from home, they are on 100% of the time. You send them an email at 2:00 in the morning because you can't sleep, and they're like, oh crap, I got to get back to my boss within 3 minutes. So we have to set those boundaries and realize that the things that you are doing right now for your team, if you're checking in with them, I care about you, how you doing, how can I help you? Or if you're just saying, how come you didn't get the report done on time? When all of this is over and they have a choice in the matter, chances are they're like, you know what, I am out of here. And again, that turnover is going to cost you a lot of money.
It's basically boiling down to treat people like humans, like people, and you'll be okay. You'll be okay. Right? Yep. Focus on the individuals first, and then look at the work. And I think we need to get away from the 9-to-5 mentality. And don't get me wrong, obviously there's some jobs out there that you have to, retail, whatever, stores are 9-to-5. Well, okay. It's kind of hard to get away from that mentality, but there's a lot of jobs out there that aren't 9-to-5. And I think we need to focus at more like, what are the results? What results are you giving me? You can say, oh, you need to work from 9-to-5 and I expect, this TPS report to be filled out within that time. Okay. You put those limitations on to me. Guess when your TPS report's going to be ready? It's going to be ready at 4:45. But if you just say, hey, I need this report done, maybe it's done at 9:45. And then we're focused on results.
Yeah.
I had a job that was at a what we call a high readiness unit. So the unit I was at, I was on a team. And my job was, if the team got called out, we were going into a country to pull Canadians out because something horrible was happening in the country. Thank God I never actually deployed on operation for that job, but it was still a super cool job. I got to do a lot of cool things. But my boss at the time was what I refer to as a clock watcher. So he expected me, he noted in his mind every time I walked in, the exact time I walked in, and he noted the exact time I left. Now, there was a lot of stress with that job in terms of I always needed to have my kit ready to go. I always had to have a plan to what was I going to do with my dog. Thankfully, no, I didn't have children at that time, so I didn't have to worry about that. But the guys that did have children, they had to worry about that. So you always had to have a plan of, if the call came in at 2:00 in the morning, what were you going to do? Now, that's a lot of stress. It didn't necessarily equate to a lot of daily work, because luckily there wasn't a lot of chaos going on in the world at the time. So some days I would have nothing to do. So who cares if I'm here? Phone me, I'll come in to work, but have the attitude of, well, if you got nothing to do and I may need you to work like crazy hours another time, let's take advantage of the current situation. And I think that's a great way of, having that work-life integration. If you do have roles where people don't necessarily have something to do all the time, or there's peaks and valleys of all jobs and all organizations. If you're in a valley, then let your people enjoy the valley to prepare them for, well, here comes the peak.
Right. Yep. It's the right thing to do. You expect them to put in the hours during the heavy times, but it's the same thing. I had a boss like that too, that if I got in, if we started at 8:00 in the morning, if I got in at 7:57, it was not noticed. But if I got in at 8:03, you got the look. And by the same token, we left at 5. And it was the stupidest thing, because we knew that if we could leave 5 minutes early, we would beat a lot of the rush hour. Right. So, and for a while we had a boss that let us do that. And then corporate came down and basically said, if you get hurt during those 5 minutes on company time, you could sue us. So what did we do? We actually were what I referred to at the starting gate, that we would stand at the door at 5 to 5, and we would just stand there. So at the stroke of 5, the starting gate would open and we would be off. And it was stupid. How much goodwill did it cost the company because of stupid policies like that? It doesn't make any sense.
No. And what is the actual likelihood of someone getting, someone getting hurt? Fairly likely, but suing the company, how is it the company's fault that you got hurt? I've never bought that argument. I'm like, show me precedent that that's actually occurred and the person has won that lawsuit. I think you'd be hard pressed. Right. But nonetheless, let's talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is knowing your employees. You talked about that, like knowing your employees. So that was something I took to heart. I would review not just personnel files when I was commanding, but I would talk to people and know them, and like you said, know who their children are, know their spouse, the ins and outs. And one of the things I used to do is Friday mornings, I would get away from my desk and walk around. Now, I was dispersed. I had 9 buildings to worry about, people in 9 different locations throughout the base. So I'd hit like 3 or 4 of them in a go on a Friday and just wander around. So that's something I used to do. I'd like to know from your standpoint, how do you really get to know your employees? What are some of the great things? And of course, what are the benefits associated with that?
One of the easiest things to do is just when you're walking into the office in the morning to just look at each employee you pass by and say, hello, how you doing? Number one, and call them by their name. That helps because, as a manager, as a leader, you're seen differently. Wow, he knows my name. But when you make that initial, hello, how you doing? You can tell a lot about an employee. Are they having a good day? Are they kind of off their game? If they're a little bit off their game, instead of just ignoring it and hoping it goes away, hey, you know what? You don't seem like you. What's going on? So spending the time to show you care. But the thing that I talk about the most and recommend is what I call the All About Me sheet. And this can be done electronically on a Survey Monkey or something like that. But it can also be, a piece of paper you have your employees fill out. What's their favorite gift card? What's their favorite candy bar? What's their favorite hobby? If you were going to give them a $10 gift certificate, what would it be to? We think that everybody likes, the particular coffee chain, and we go out and we get a bunch of those certificates. And what if that person doesn't drink coffee, but they would really like a gas card? It's just getting to know so you can recognize employees in the moment in the ways that they want to be recognized. This actually, in Harvey Mackay's classic book from the 1980s, Swim with the Sharks Without Getting Eaten Alive, he talks about the Mackay 66. Harvey Mackay actually ran an envelope company. And the Mackay 66 is a list of 66 questions that over time, Harvey would make sure that he knew about all of his clients. He knew their political affiliations. I wouldn't get into that, but he knew their favorite restaurants. He knew their kids. He knew their kids' names and ages and pets and everything else, so that he could have a conversation with his clients and also with his employees. So getting to know people, and you're not sitting down and putting them through the 3rd degree and interrogating them, but it's just little things that you do over time, and you keep notes. You don't have to memorize all of this stuff, but you have it written down. And before you have a meeting with Bob, you look at Bob. Oh, yeah, that's right. Bob's daughter had her first dance recital last week. So Bob walks in and is like, how was little Sally's dance recital? So, and Bob's like, oh my goodness, he pays attention. No, you didn't. You just looked at your notes 5 minutes ago. But it still gives you that, the illusion, and you really do care, and people notice it.
Love it. I especially love that part about when you walk in to work and noticing people. So I have a thing that I do personally, and that's my first 30 minutes of the day. So when I walk in, often I ask people like, so what do you do when you first show up to work? And they're like, well, grab my coffee, say hi to a couple people, and then I sit at my desk and I start crunching emails and check my calendar and all that jazz. I'm like, right. So this is what I would do for my first 30 minutes a day. I'd walk in, drop my backpack, because I'm a backpack carrier, and grab my coffee, because I'm an avid coffee drinker. Feel free to send me Tim Hortons gift cards, anybody. And but I would take my coffee and I'd wander around for 30 minutes, and I would talk to people. And I had one rule: there was no shop talk. It was all about, hey, did you watch the game last night? How was your weekend? Blah 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 blah. And much like you said, I really like your formalized, have a sheet that you go back and fill out. I think that's a really great idea, especially good for small, medium-sized teams that you might have 30 or 40 people. So it's really hard. And then as you get growing bigger and bigger, it really gets tough to manage all that unless you're really organized. So good luck to you. But I think it's a really good idea, because you go ahead, you make these notes, but it's through those casual conversations of no shop talk. That's when people actually open up to you. And that enables you to get to know them on those deeper levels. And then when you get to know them on those deeper levels, you have those connections that, they're going to go to bat for you when you have those crisis moments. They're the ones that are going to stick around through the tough times. They're going to be the ones that will back you up when someone's trying to put you down and all these things. So knowing your employees is so crucial, yet people just don't do it, or they don't do it well. It drives me bonkers.
Yep.
But it keeps people like you and I employed.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it shouldn't drive me bonkers too much. Yeah. But unfortunately, the listener here is not one of those people. They're the type that's, frothy at the mouth. They want to learn more, hence why they're listening to this podcast. All right, let's hit the last one, shall we? Serve a greater mission. I thought that was such a great idea, a great notion. Obviously, me being Canadian Army, I immediately serve a greater mission, and that I serve the country. I serve our alliances and stuff like that. And I've served next to U.S. soldiers and operations. So, but there's always a greater mission. When I was a commander, my greater mission was how do I take care of, how do I improve my people so that our squadron became the best squadron ever. Right. Mm-hmm. That was my greater mission at that time for those 2 years. So I like to hear your thoughts on, how does a leader figure out what for the organization, what should the greater mission be, and how do you go about implementing that?
It can be as simple as, I spoke to it was a spring manufacturing association. Okay. There is an association literally for everything, but these people make springs. And if you think about it, there are springs in everything. And what this one guy would do is he would have a part of the week and he would take a picture of that spring and he would put it on a poster on the wall. So the guys in the shop would be able to see, ooh, this spring goes into this aircraft fighter. This spring goes into this piece of hospital equipment. So knowing that they are not just on the line making springs, they are contributing to the economy. They can see exactly what they did. I think the most fun one was the guy that said that they made the springs that go in the turkey and they pop up the turkey thing. I'm like, how fun is that when you're cooking turkey? But anyway, or just there are some organizations that will do, corporate social responsibility. So maybe they'll give their employees the day off once a quarter, once a year, and encourage them to go and do some kind of volunteer work. And there are tons of apps for that, in that you can put different people in charge of different charitable organizations that resonate with them. They can put a team together. People can log in on the app. They can show what they're doing. So they're just not looking for excuses to get off work. They're actually giving back to the greater good. And it's shown that people who volunteer regularly they have great health outcomes. They have less stress. They feel part. They're building relationships, and they're feeling a more solid commitment to the organization as well. So again, we can do everything from just explaining to our employees and showing our employees how their tiny little task, their tiny little piece of the organization is important for the entire running, not only of the company, but of society as a whole. If you can really expand your mind to that. Or we can take a look at, how do we allow our employees to give back? When COVID started, you think about the number of, for us, we have in Northeast Ohio, several of the breweries here, the microbreweries, started making hand sanitizers. I mean, how cool is this? To be able to show your employees you can pivot on a dime. One day you're making beer, the next day you're saving lives with hand sanitizer. The companies that were making like clothing and stuff to turn on a dime and be able to make masks, and employees are feeling that they're saving lives. So anything that we can do to just create that connection to the employee and let them know that you are important, your job is important, and our mission as an organization is what moves everything forward. And then when you have that, again, it really creates that strong connection.
People rally with crisis and helping others, right? Like it's such a driver of, as you said, connection. You never see a team gel until all of a sudden they're rallying towards a cause and something that's beyond the bottom line.
Yep.
And I've luckily been a part of many a number of organizations and within the Canadian Army and the Canadian Forces that when we get a call, you suddenly see the switch in all of us, and we're like, all right, now we're playing for real. And now suddenly everybody gels because we know that's greater mission is there now, and we're playing the real game because there are lives on the line, and often you put it into context, and it's so true that people's lives do end up being on the line. I remember I was giving a presentation to a business class, and I said, what ultimately what's the goal of the Canadian Forces, and it's ultimately to save lives. Well. Mm-hmm. That's also the same for business if you put it in the right context, because the goal of a business is to earn profits. I mean, let's call spade a spade. They're there to make money, which is the reason why they exist, and that's how it is. But how do they get the profits? Well, they get it through services or products. Well, where does those things come from? Well, they come from people. Well, what do people do? Well, they provide time to a business and make services products. Well, how do they get compensated? Money. What does that money do? Put a roof over their head and food on their plate so they can eat. So if your business doesn't survive, you're now putting people at risk. That's how you put, so serving that greater mission. But then when you start serving, even beyond that, because things are good, and there's so many great examples out there of organizations doing things with Habitat for Humanity, for example, building homes for homeless. It's such a great thing. It drives me nuts when you see, oh, that's just a photo op. Well, you know what? It's still done. Maybe it was. There are some people out there that do, they do the photo op and stuff like that. But you know what? Did the walls go up? Yeah. Does the person now who didn't have a house have a house? Yep. Well, there's good. So let's focus on the good and forget the bad.
Yep.
So many good things. Lisa, this has been such a great conversation. And before we hit record, you said there's no way this thing's lasting 20 minutes. And you're sure as heck right about that.
I know what happens when we start talking.
Oh, yeah. When we get a couple of leadership as geeks, as I like to refer to us as, going, we get going. But to wrap up here, I got a few last things that I'd like to ask you. And the first one being a question I ask all the guests here moving forward leadership. And that is, according to you, Lisa Ryan, what makes a great leader?
A great leader is someone who is approachable, acknowledges others, is transparent and earns the respect of the people, no matter what level they are in the organization.
That is beautiful. Absolutely love it. And finally, feel free to give yourself a shameless plug. It's all about you right now. Where can people find you? How can they contact you? Be part of your journey.
Sure.
It's all about
Yeah. My website is lisaryanspeaks.com. Probably, and there's videos and articles. Probably the best way is to connect with me on LinkedIn. Not only do I have a ton of articles there, but I have been posting a tips video, a 60 to 90 second video every day that gives employee engagement tips. Now, I know that Lisa Ryan is quite the popular name, shall we say. So if you just search on Lisa Ryan and Grategy, which is the name of my company, and yes, it does stand for Gratitude Strategies, Grategey. Connect with me here, connect with me on LinkedIn, and just write a note that says, hey, I heard you on the show and would love to connect.
You know what? That's great. I have a better idea. Listener, why don't you just go to movingforwardleadership.com/133, and all those, including the direct link to Lisa's LinkedIn profile, are in the show notes. Website, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. They're actually all there already as we chat right now, as we record. But seriously, Lisa, it's been a fantastic interview, fantastic conversation. Not an interview, I hate interview. It's been a fantastic conversation, and it's so great to have been connected with you.
Well, thank you. It was a blast.
All right, that's all I got for you fine folks today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And most importantly, I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, remember R squared, S squared, right? Rate and review the show so that it gets a little bit noticed, a bit more. But most importantly, I can help more people, because that's what I'm here for. That's what my guests are here for, is to help more people become better leaders and not being bosses, right? So remember that. R squared, rate and review. S, share the show. Share this show with someone who you think can relate to the podcast as a whole and today's topic. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And you can do that via your podcast playing app of choice through movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, stop bossing and start leading. Take care now.